All right, well, it's certainly been a while and there's been lots going on and no darn time for making videos, but we're gonna get back into her here. We're gonna make it happen one way or the other because there's just too many ideas that got to be put to video, and if we don't get at it, well, it's never gonna happen. So a few jobs on the go here. One of my more fun projects coming up will be turning these two steel bars into propeller shafts. So can't wait to get started on that. But I'll show you real quickly what I was up to the other day that reminded me that you should always use your brain. So let's head on over. Okay, this, about a foot across, cost a fortune. Has a little air bellows in there. I'll describe later how this thing works, but for now just know that it's a flanged unit. It's kind of a water seal arrangement, dripless packing arrangement, I guess. So we got to adapt this face to an existing face in the boat. So we'll go over there next. Okay, so here we are in the boat. We're over on the starboard side looking aft through the stern tube. This is the forward face of the stern tube where the propeller shaft would head back out that way, and the propeller gets hung on the back end there. There's what's called a cutlass bearing on the aft end. There's a new housing, cutlass bearing housing, been welded on the aft end of the stern tube. It's all been line bored before we put the cutlass bearing in. And when the line bore guys came, they cleaned up the inside diameter here and they faced this flange. Originally it had a conventional stuffing box packing arrangement with flax packing and a gland that was forced in with four 5/8 studs that were threaded in at those four locations there. This is about 8.5 inches across. We've got to install that roughly 12-inch diameter bronze flange water seal, dripless water seal arrangement. And so we need an adapter plate to go in between. And this is the whole part of my story here, is that when I was in a big hurry making up these adapter flanges that are steel with a bronze sort of pilot ring that picks up on that ID to hold it concentric, I didn't worry too much about the bolt pattern of the four original holes. I figured, oh well, you know, they'll be pretty darn close. I'll oversize them one drill bit size. It'll be all right. We can always chase it a wee bit with an end mill if we have to. The plan being is that we attach it with the four original stud holes, and then we laid out and marked four additional new holes that we then drilled it and tapped in situ here, so that we have 8 fasteners holding that on there and turning that flange into a proper bearing joint where the pressure of the bolts squeezing the flanges together are going to keep everything happy. We don't rely on either the pilot ring or the bolts to taking up shear load to hold it in place. Not that it's going to see a heck of a lot of load, but that's the idea anyway. Real scientific. So turns out that this bore is not really all that concentric to the original bolt circle of those 4 holes. So if I just slowed down for a minute, I would have remembered or thought through, and could have saved myself a little bit of time. Not the end of the world. I'll show you the adapter plates. They don't look too bad, but this is what I should have done. So just ignore these other 4 unused threaded holes for now, because we put those in after the fact. We were trying to pick up the bolt circle of these 4 original drilled and tapped holes compared to this bore, which is not concentric. This is a true bolt circle, but it's not, the center of it is not in the center of this bore here. So what I should have done is thrown in some studs or bolts or anything. They're pretty darn tight. They wiggle a little bit. Doesn't matter. If they were to shoulder right against that face, that would be better. It would tend to hold them as near to square as you could possibly get, but the holes are blind holes and we can't get right down to the bottom. Doesn't matter. You know, this would still be a heck of a lot closer than the just by guess or by gore version. So then take any kind of straight edge, stick that underneath, and then reach in there with a measuring instrument. Yeah, this is really hard to do with one hand. So yeah, something like that. Look, another sled. So reach in there with a measuring instrument, more or less zero out on the top of the straight edge, and then into the bore, wiggle it around until you find the low point there. Measure that off, record it. Then do precisely the same thing on the top and on the two sides, left and right. So here we are at the design program, all booted up, you can see. I know it is what it is, but it's just so you can get the idea. We've got the original outside diameter of the flange, which we're going to assume is untrustworthy. We've got the original bolt circle, which is centered at C1, and we've got the new bore, which is here, which is centered at C2. So to arrive at the offset in these two directions for, you know, your X and Y for the new location of C2, I'm suggesting that we just take a straight edge picked up on those bolt holes in the original bolt circle that's at C1. We measure from there to there, and then we measure from on the other side. Of course, I'm looking through a camera while I'm doing this, so it's a little difficult. We measure across there, so there will be a larger number, there will be a smaller number. Subtract the smaller number from the greater number, and that's going to move us over that far to get to that axis. And then we do exactly the same thing. Just measure from there to there. Likewise, there to there. One would just want to be careful that you're always referencing your straight edge in the real world. You know, if you're on the outside of those studs, make sure you're on the outside of the stud when you're taking the measurement, and then that will give you your offset from there to there, so that all you have to do when you go to make the part, so knowing those two numbers, all one has to do is when you're going to make your part, in this case we would have been drilling these 4 holes here, which I then had to go in after the fact and make, you know, oblong with an end mill. But had I have just sat down and thought about this ahead of time, you know, find the center of your part with a coaxial indicator, or, you know, dial test indicator, whatever you want. Zero out your machine, so we'll assume that we've just done that. And we zero out our machine and just run your offsets in, whatever you came up for your offsets in X and Y, and then zero out again, and then start your bolt circle from that offset center. And Bob's your auntie, you're going to get those, you know, those will be offset the correct amount. You just want to also bear in mind the, you know, sort of layout of your, you know, where these, if you're starting at 0 or you're starting at 45, that's up to you. That's a little bit more into the whole bolt circle sort of layout, and we might talk more about that later on. And I know it's confusing as hell because there's 8 holes here and I'm only talking about 4, but use your brain, you'll figure it out. And it would be a good excuse to make another video someday. So we've countersunk these 4 original holes and held it in place with those little socket head cap screws. And then we drilled and tapped 4 additional holes, and now we're going to remove the threads and counter bore these as well, so they'll all end up looking the same. It's just that we've got 2 totally different bolt circles here, one to pick up on the original 4 and one to pick up in 4 fresh locations. These are never intended to be disassembled. Once it's assembled, they will be in place for the next 50 years. So the bronze ring pilots into that freshly lined board sort of diameter that's in the stern tube in the boat, and then gets held in place with its 8 fasteners. And then we're going to drill the mounting holes and yet another bolt circle that'll be, of course, centered with this bore, to then mount this bronze housing against, and then life will be good. Yeah, just a little anecdote that you know, sometimes it's a healthy reminder that you're not as smart as you think you are, or you should just sit down and have a good think before you dive in head first and go at it with your head down, right? So, not the end of the world. Again, it's a bearing joint, so those don't have to be, you know, fitted holes, but it's always nicer when it's nearer to perfection.